I think the most brilliant thing about Squid Game Season 2 is that while we see the literal games played out in the arena, this season isn't actually about those games. This season, really, secretly, is about another game, a deeper and more important game, and one that is being played right in front of us, hiding in plain sight. I'm going to argue that the most important scene, or one of the most important scenes of the season, is when our main character Gi-hun has that conversation with the frontman with In-ho in the limo. Because this is where the real game, the one between the two men at the center of the story, really begins. Because remember, ever since Gi-hun emerged as the victor of the first games, the frontman has insisted to him, just walk away, take your money, live a life of luxury, and never think about the rest of us ever again. And In-ho truly is baffled that Gi-hun is not doing this, and is in fact spending his money solely to try and hunt them down. But as much as the frontman is baffled, he's also undeniably intrigued by what is going on inside Gi-hun's mind. And so upon seeing how badly Gi-hun wants to speak with him, he decides to entertain one conversation to see if he can figure this strange man out. And here, in this pivotal conversation, is where the philosophies of these two men at odds play out. Gi-hun explains his stance clearly. He says that the money he won is blood money, and that the only moral thing to do is to either leave it alone or spend it in the effort of tearing down the games and the people behind all their unjust cruelty. But almost immediately, upon hearing this, In-ho says that that stance is both dumb and just plain wrong. He reminds Gi-hun that no one running the games forced the people to play. He reminds them that all the players had the choice to leave if they wanted to, but they didn't. And that's because, In-ho says, they wanted to take part in these violent games. And that's because, In-ho tells Gi-hun, that is simply the way the world is. The games, he argues, are not introducing anything radically new into the world. The lowest of the low, the trash as he calls them, will just always beat each other to climb to the top. The only difference is that here, their games give them the chance to achieve a level of wealth that would be impossible in the real world. And so, In-ho tells Gi-hun that the only way to really stop the games is to change the world. And so he tells him, if the world doesn't change, the game doesn't end. But Gi-hun rejects this almost immediately, and he comes back with 3 counters. First, he accuses the frontman and everyone running that thing of not really knowing the games. He says even as they organize it all and watch from their screens, they have no idea what it feels like to actually be on the ground, to actually experience the unnatural brutality and cruelty that takes place. And so Gi-hun tells In-ho that he is in no position to philosophize on the true nature of the games because he didn't see it as Gi-hun did. Now, quick aside, as Jun-ho revealed to us in his investigation in season 1, we the audience know that In-ho is actually a prior victor of the games himself. So presumably, he knows the on-the-ground nature of the games very well. But crucially, Gi-hun doesn't know this. And In-ho knows that Gi-hun doesn't know this. And that becomes very important to their wager in just a bit. Anyway, Gi-hun's second counter was that the choice they offered the contestants to leave if they wanted to was an illusion and ultimately unfair and dishonest. They brought them to the games under dishonest means, didn't tell them the true nature of it, and did their best to discourage votes to leave, dangling the fact that if they do so, they'd get to keep none of their prize money. So the choice was on paper there, but the organizers of the game made it an almost impossible choice to make. So the idea that the people chose to stay out of their own free will is, to Gi-hun, it's laughable. And so he tells In-ho, you don't care about what's fair or the societal status quo, not really. And if you believe you do, you're just in denial. Because all this really is just about giving your clients a good show. And then thirdly, Gi-hun reminds In-ho of the deathbed gamble he made with Il-nam, the old man founder of the games. Remember, at the end of season 1, Il-nam and he stared out the window and saw an ailing man dying in the cold. And there they wagered the nature of humanity on that one moment. They decided, as they watched, that if they ultimately saw some good Samaritan come by and help that man, then Il-nam and all the people running the games would be wrong, because this would prove that the nature of the world is not one of brutality and brutally beating each other, but one of kindness, one of hope and community, something ultimately revealed if people are only given the chance to show it. But if every passerby coldly left the man to die, then it would prove Il-nam and In-ho right, that the world itself is disgusting and violent, and they are introducing nothing new to it with the violence of their games. But in those last moments of season 1, during that wager, we ultimately see one good person stop and call an ambulance to get the freezing man some help. But Gi-hun tells In-ho that Il-nam was too much of a coward to face that fact, because right in that moment, he died. And Gi-hun chooses to believe that Il-nam saw that he lost, but that he chose to believe in his lie and die with it instead. He chose to be dishonest. And so he implies that In-ho similarly would never face the truth that there is hope in the people that he believes are trash, and the truth that if kindness is the real nature of people, then the Squid Games' violence is an unnatural, evil thing they have introduced to them, not something inherent in the people. And so, in short, Gi-hun is telling In-ho to his face, you are wrong. You are absolutely and irredeemably wrong. And if you could see it the way I saw it, you might understand that you're wrong. And there's a neat beat in the middle here where In-ho says, okay, but what was your plan here? What was your plan here right now? Were you going to try and kidnap me with your little gun? Which was the plan, yes. Or did you think you were somehow going to convince me to believe your take on all of this? And even as In-ho implies that that would be ridiculous, he also suggests that that would be the more fascinating and the more respectable way of playing this. And so this is where Gi-hun surprises and impresses In-ho, because this is where Gi-hun puts down his gun, stares down at the speaker from which In-ho is talking, and he tells him, put me back in the games. And look, this was initially one of my hangups with season 2 when I first saw the trailers, because I was like, why on earth would this man ever choose to willingly go back to the games? How does it make any sort of sense that he could be back there? But the show sets this up really well by reminding us Gi-hun is a gambler. Gambling is what got him into financial trouble in the first place, and even if he's done chasing the highs of making money now, gambling is still his tool of choice in doing the things he believes are more important. That is, it is still how he opts to prove his points. When he wants to prove a point to Il-nam at the end of season 1, he chooses to gamble with him. When the recruiter proposes a game of Russian roulette, something he does not need to do, he agrees to the gamble to prove something to them both. And so when he finds himself trapped in In-ho's car debating the moral nature of the Squid Game itself, he, in order to dramatically prove his point, in the only way he knows how, proposes a gamble. He says, put me back in the games, and I'll prove to you everything I just told you. I'll prove to you that you're wrong. I'll prove to you that the Squid Games are an unnatural and disgusting thing. That the games are not just finding humans as evil as they are, but twisting and corrupting them for some perverse fun. And if Gi-hun succeeds in this gamble, in proving his point, then In-ho must end them. Now, quick caveat, at this point in the season, Gi-hun's primary plan is to get to the games, yes, but then to use the tracker in his mouth to have Jun-ho's team find him and stop the games. However, even as that is the primary plan, just in Gi-hun's delivery here, you can understand that the gamble in his words is coming from somewhere true. He does legitimately, regardless of whether he thinks he'll ever get this chance, wish to prove to In-ho that he is wrong. And he's not afraid to endanger himself in order to do that. But anyway, yes, Gi-hun says, put me back in the games, and I'll prove all this to you. And In-ho is so moved, so fascinated by this choice, that he even hesitates to respond at first. But ultimately, he says fine, and he welcomes Gi-hun back into the games. But what's so interesting here is that not only does In-ho accept this gamble, but he resolves to dive into it completely and give Gi-hun the chance to prove every single one of his points. And to do that, he makes two significant changes to the games. Firstly, he takes Gi-hun's assertion that the choice to quit was done unfairly before and says, okay, we'll fix that. And so in this version of the games, the opportunity to quit is literally put in the players' faces at almost every opportunity. In-ho decides that fine, we will not only tell the players that they can quit at any time, we will literally force them to vote at the end of each game and literally stick their votes on their chests as a constant reminder that this is all a choice. And you're saying losing the money by quitting is unfair? Fine. This time they can keep any money they earned thus far. So In-ho is calling Gi-hun's bluff by saying, look, the choice to quit is so clear, it's so easy now, so you can't say we obscured it. And then the second choice? Well, Gi-hun is so adamant that experiencing the games is different than just watching them, that if In-ho were down on the ground with him, he would see how cruel all of this is, how people are not by nature evil, how the games corrupt them, and how the truth of people is kindness, that In-ho would be convinced of all that if he were just to see it as Gi-hun did. Then fine. In-ho decides, I will literally join the games, disguised but right beside you, to have a front row seat. I will give you every opportunity to give me the experience that you say will prove me wrong. This time, you have my full attention. Essentially, In-ho is saying, fine, Gi-hun, you want to prove something to me? Okay, sure. This time, we're playing your games. And so with all that in place, the real game of season 2 begins, and it's not red light, green light, it's not gongi, it's not really any of those things. It's really this elaborate wager between two men, with Gi-hun resolving to prove to In-ho that he's right, and In-ho saying, okay, if you can show me that these people don't want to kill each other, that these people are at their heart kind, that they are not the scum of the earth, and don't deserve to be here, that they will leave to stop doing this if given the chance, then I will allow you to prove me wrong. I'll admit that you won. But In-ho implies, if what I think will happen happens, if everyone stays in the game despite being given every opportunity to leave, if people continue on in their cruelty and violence even when given the chance to stop it all, then I will have proven my point, and I'll have done so standing side by side with you. And so, the game goes on. And yes, the players consistently vote to keep playing, so Gi-hun loses on that wager. And then yeah, the players prove to be as ruthless and as cruel as before, or even more so, and so In-ho wins on that wager as well. But what is really his full win, what really seals the deal of the loss of this gamble, is when Gi-hun, without even realizing it, in his own actions, proves In-ho right. Because when their backs are to a wall near the end of the season, Gi-hun hatches a plan for rebellion, and admits that this means they'll need to sacrifice a few innocent people. And In-ho, in disguise, asks Gi-hun how they could possibly do that and still be in the right. And here, even when In-ho is giving him the explicit opportunity to take the moral high ground he supposedly values so much, Gi-hun just tells him that some people will need to die if they are to win. And just like that, without even realizing it, Gi-hun has just subscribed to the same exact philosophy of the games themselves. That violence, disgusting and morally depraved violence, is the necessarily accepted reality of living in this world. That is just the nature of the people of this world, and that trying to avoid that or win without it is at its best naive and at worst unwise. And so, with all that evidence in mind, upon seeing Gi-hun fail at his every wager, In-ho decides he's seen enough. And so he packs it all up. He sneaks away from the other players, joins the guards again, and dons his mask once more to face Gi-hun properly now and tell him that he hopes he enjoyed his little game and that he hopes he enjoyed playing the hero. But ultimately, he lost his grand gamble, and In-ho won. And so now they will proceed with the games as usual. Because In-ho gave him his chance. In-ho allowed the two men to play their little spin-off game. In-ho was willing to be proven wrong. But in the end, after all that talk and all that setup and drama, in the end, they had proved to each other nothing new. And that whole setup is just so brilliant to me. And it actually explains how season 2 is structured. Because I initially thought season 2 only felt like 2/3 of a season because they didn't bother to finish the actual Squid Games in the show. But then in this lens, you'd realize that, again, the actual Squid Games were not the center of season 2 and were not what were driving the story. No, again, the real game was the gamble, was the wager between these two men. And so this season showed us the beginning, middle, and conclusion of that game between these two people. And so judged on that arc, it is a whole season, it is a whole game, and it is, yes, thereby a whole story. And to In-ho's satisfaction, he emerged from all of that, this time, as the winner. Now, I want to make very clear to my audience, I obviously don't agree with In-ho. I do believe there was a point in believing in the inherent goodness of people and that the Squid Games are in fact a disgusting institution. But that just is not the thesis of season 2. I do expect, though, after this dramatic and powerful cliffhanger ending, that will be the thesis of season 3. But we'll just have to wait a few months to find out. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. I make a lot of content on movies and TV shows, so if any of this was interesting to you, I'd love to keep doing this. So please leave a like, leave a comment if you can too. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this. And if you want to hear more of my thoughts on this show and many others, I'd love it if you could subscribe as well. That's all I got for now, but see you again soon.